figuring out what time it is. The title of this panel is The Ravenous Bestseller and the Innocent Literary Gem. And it's a subtitle that has something or other to do with recent trends in dark fantasy and horror. And I think we have a very good group of people to talk about that subject. What I'd like each of them to do from left to right is to introduce themselves and just tell a little bit about what they've been up to lately. Literally. Joe, can you tell what you were doing last night? No. Rick, you start.
Okay, I'm Robert Rick McCammon. I just finished a book called Mine. It'll be out in May. It's about a woman who belonged to an organization similar to the Sudanese Liberation Army in the 70s. The organization is called Stormfront. And she kidnaps another woman's baby, and the book is about the search for this woman and the baby she's kidnapped. It's not really a supernatural horror novel, it's a psychological horror novel, so it's something different for me, and that's what I've been doing.
What have I been doing? I've just finished up short story collections coming out from Mark Zeesing, and a suspense novel that's coming out next year from band.
Titles.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. The short story collection is by Bizarre Hands. The novel is...
What's its title?
The novel, by Bizarre Hands. It is by Bizarre Hands, and it is titled by Bizarre Hands. It actually has a short story called By Bizarre Hands. There's a novel coming out next year that's currently untitled, because I think it was Raymond Chandler that says, I'm currently making up a title that you want to change or something. That's the way it is with me. I've gone through 2 titles and they've changed, but it is a suspense novel currently untitled coming out next year.
I'm Tappan King. I'm between jobs. I'm currently working on a supernatural horror type novel called The Devil's Bargain. That title is likely to be changed, which is sort of a cross between dark horror and sort of transcendent divine fantasy. And it should be done in about a year if I work real hard.
I'm John Coyne. I've just published a book called Fury. That was not my title. It is a novel that being published by Warner's, and which they put on the cover of Reincarnation and Revenge.
My name is Antieau. I primarily have published horror short story, and my stuff is called quiet horror. I guess because you don't get it until the end. That's why it's called forever. I've just completed a novel that I haven't figured out what category it is yet. It takes place on the moon, but it's about the first person who died and what happens to his soul. And it's called When the Moon Was Blood. I guess it's horror that takes place on the moon.
Okay, I'd like to short circuit one thing that could happen to this panel, because I've been on panels that had the word dark fantasy in the title about 4 times in the last year. I think we'll just all stipulate that dark fantasy is an interesting marketing term that somebody dragged in to broaden how people think of horror, and just leave that whole discussion alone. What I'd like each person to do is to talk about something which they've read recently, or skimmed, because we're all very busy, that seems to represent something fresh in the broad field of horror, supernatural horror, and dark fantasy. When I say horror, I want to include things without supernatural elements as well. Starting again on the left, what excites you effectively?
I actually, and please don't think that I'm saying this just because Joe is sitting here. I'm not. I read it driving, and I was really knocked out by that because it's. I think it's interesting to me because horror, who knows what it is anymore? I mean, it's so many different things. And the field is broadening and widening, and fantasy and science fiction and suspense and horror all merging together. And I think that's healthy because it's the field is just going in different directions, and that's fine. Also, I think that humor is becoming a large part of horror writing, and that's something that excites me. I think that's very interesting, and it makes the writing much more fun if you can get some humor in it. Mystery and horror is certainly combining. So I think there's a lot of very fresh things happening in the field, and that horror is broadening and widening and expanding, and a lot of different genres are coming together and creating new genres. Or not creating new genres, because I hate the word genre. I just hate
It's not even English.
to say that anything it should be it should be a narrow classification, because it certainly shouldn't be. But I just think horror is kind of reinventing itself right now.
So aside from the exotic dancer, what excites you?
Oh, I could give us $5 for the drive.
Give him $5 for the drive.
I was trying to think of any particular book or story that I've read recently, and to tell you the truth, nothing jumps right out at me. I've been rereading Flannery O'Connor, who I love and who scares me to death while I laugh. And I like Flannery O'Connor, and she's not new. But I think that pretty much what he said in one sense is that I think Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs are examples of where horror seems to be moving, and Coco for that matter. The more of a realistic sort of horror. I mean, I think we're dealing with serial killers and the Vietnam War. And I think these things, instead of being I think we used broader symbols in the past. I think we're going directly to the meat now. Instead of a werewolf that's a serial killer, we're talking about serial killers straight out, because there's an epidemic of it. You read it all the time. You see it on the news. And I think when you start writing horrors and, gee, the vampire jumped out and got him, just doesn't cut it anymore. I think that can still be done very, very well, because there are also people who on the other side want to get away from the realistic things of every day, and they like that. But I do believe that one of the main trends is towards realistic horror. And then on the other hand, the small press, I've seemed to notice a lot of what I call surrealistic horror, where it's, I guess it's an expansion of what Lovecraft came up with there's something on the outside, or things are as they appear. And it seems to me that the small press is always, the best of the small press, always sort of shows you where the short fiction field is going. And I think that's one of the things I've noticed, is a lot of surrealism in short stories, and a breakdown of what you think is real. None of this is ever really new. I mean, Robert Bloch was doing Psychos long before, Thomas Harris. But I believe that currently, as the field grows and there's a larger readership, that those are two trends that I see. And also the fact that horror seems to be, as he says, broadening, because you read things now, they have horror elements, they have suspense elements, they have mystery elements, and even science fiction elements. I think that they're blending a lot better and a lot more successfully than maybe they have in the past. And there you are.
I'm very much in agreement with Joe, much to my surprise. No, I made the mistake of reading Coco and Kilridge cover to cover within a short period of time of each other, and really began to sort of look behind me as I was walking, because both of those books let you know just how malevolent the universe can be, and they do it with strict material. They do it with material stuff. They don't do it with supernatural material. They show you just how scary the universe is. Dennis Etchison does that for me. Dennis Etchison rarely steps into the supernatural, and he is, I think, more of a noir writer in a certain sense. He has more in common with the mystery writers of the 40s and the 50s in terms of his worldview. In a weird sense, because of my tenure when I was editing Twilight Zone, I began to get real uncomfortable with what I call New Age writing, which is New Age pronounced rhyme with sewage. I'm discovering that I really want to get back to the material. I want to get back to the real world. Science fiction is beginning to interest me, and I had heard somebody, and please, the next person you hear say this word is throttled. I heard the word Cyrus Platt mentioned, and I don't want to know what it is. But the idea that we are perhaps getting older and more focused on the real and material world is interesting to me. On the other hand, I also agree with Joe and with Rick that humor and the surreal are the other obvious direction. I remember a story that was in the collection Silver Screen by an old friend of mine, Mark Arnold, a story called Pilgrims to the Cathedral. And if you've not read the story, it's the other haunted drive-in story. And it's really amazing to me that the small town drive-in just sort of exploded as an icon. And Joe, I love both of his drive-in books. And Pilgrims to the Cathedral is about a triple screen drive-in that is sanctified by the vital fluids of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and conjures up this weird mythic spirit. And the thing I like about Mark's story, it's funny. It's not as funny as Joe's, but nobody's funny. as funny as a joke.
That's another $5.
But it's also synthetic, and I'm going to use the word very kind of deliberately. What it does is to disagree with particularly Roman Catholic supernatural iconography. It says any old thing can go into the supernatural, and it can all be in a kind of pot together, a melting pot of supernatural imagery. And that really excites me, the idea that you can sort of blend together a variety of Native American mythology and Asian and stuff. And that's because that's the kind of culture we live in. So that's what I'm saying. John?
I think there's two things that sort of contradict each other. Number one, I just read a partial manuscript by a local writer, David Meyer, which is a very urban hit novel that blends what people have been saying here, that it's sort of mystery and humor, and pulls it off with a new kind of energy. And I think that the new material that will come from new writers who are just getting into the field and who have new ideas, or perhaps not even as well read in the field, but and because of that, they have an advantage of pulling into the field new kinds of perceptions and material. And I think this is very true of David's book. He blends into a kind of movie technology into a contemporary setting. And at the same time he's doing that, he's going back into an old ghost story. And that's the second part. I see a lot of, it hasn't happened yet, but I think you're going to see a return to traditional kinds of stories like ghost stories, for example. People are going to reinvent that metaphor. And they're going to take the oldest ideas in the game and repackage them. And I'm from New York, and I haven't been overly exposed to publishers. And what I see that they're saying to me is that they're hearing from their sales people that a lot of customers are coming in and saying, don't you have something that's more traditional? So at the same time, we're going to get new things, which I think we'll get from new writers. We'll also be new ideas, new material in the field. We'll also be seeing old ideas, haunted house ideas coming up in a fresh new way.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't read. First, I start out to say that I have not read a lot of horror, even though I've been writing it for about 5 years, because I put it under the category. I don't anymore, but I did. Sort of, it wasn't called horror. It was all sick fic. And I figured anybody, it just had to be really sick human beings writing it. And myself included. So I've only recently started writing or reading other things besides my own stuff in horror. And the last book I read was mine, and of course that was wonderful. But I hope, what I see too, is that it is going towards serial killers and psychopaths. And somebody called that gore. And I hope it doesn't go that way totally, because I'm not interested in it at all. And I just did a workshop with some high school kids. The high school kids love hearing about horror. We were talking about this. And there was a real difference between the males and the females in the class. And the males thought the serial killers were great, and the females were not interested in it at all. And we talked about it, and often the victims of serial killers are women. So I'm not personally interested in reading about serial killers because it's too real, because it's too real. So I like the supernatural, and I like having when somebody does something really original, I hope it goes back to the ghost story, because I think ghost stories are great. Have you ever read Turn of the Screw? I mean, that's one of the most terrifying stories I've ever read. Realistic horror, I guess, in a way would be, or surreal horror would be Kafka. What's the story where he turns into the...
Metamorphosis.
Yes. That's horror. The most recent horror that I've read was The Key by Wilson, and it was on tape, and I was driving back and forth to work. I ordinarily wouldn't have read it. And I got so interested in it, I got the book and read it. And I found that fascinating, because get Nazis and vampires together, and it's a great story. So I hope that it doesn't go completely towards psychopaths and serial killers.
Joe?
Yeah, I don't think it will. But I think too that lot of women read psychopath.
Oh, well,
But the thing I'm saying is that I would want to see it go one or the other.
Yeah.
I started out, and I've written a lot of the supernatural stuff too. I've written quiet, and I've written very loud, and I've written things that I call satirical horror and whatever, just doing the best I can do, one sort of the other, whatever comes up. I don't think it's ever going to go one way entirely.
I hope it.
But I think that right now, it seems to me that is the trend. But I think that after a while, when people get saturated with that they'll go back the other way. For me, it's harder and harder to read supernatural fiction and make the jump to believe it. There was a time when I could, and I don't know whether it's because I don't believe in the supernatural, and that has something to do. For me, if it's
Or is
going to
the
work,
author not doing
well,
a good
yeah,
job?
that's true too. But I think too, the author has to make the supernatural in the story represent something else to it. It doesn't have to be very obvious, but it has to have some underlying thematic point, and then it somehow becomes believable. It's just, there's a spook in the closet, or there are spooks running around, it just doesn't do much for me. But if it's got some meaning behind it, like it's like King's about possible child abuse and alcoholism and stuff, then those ghosts are really, they're more than just boo bears. They have something else going on.
I'd like to put everybody on the spot, you don't have to name names, but if from left to right you could talk about a kind of horror that you think is a bad trend, what kinds of books are you seeing too many of?
Us personally, that we don't like.
Yeah, you don't like. Rick?
Well, before I get into that, I'd like to say something about a couple of books that I really enjoy. And one I just started to get into is Geek Club.
Yeah, it's very.
But is that a horror novel? Is it funny? Fantasy? What is it? And I think it's a good book. It's just a good book. And it may get to the point where you really don't recognize what horror is anymore, but you always recognize a good book. Maybe that's the way it ought to be.
Yeah.
Also, the book Perfume, which I thought was a wonderful book.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's precisely horror.
Yeah, I mean, what is it?
Yeah.
But
And that's
still.
the whole term horror is a very loose term because a lot of the books I write, I don't consider them horror. It's not a snobbish thing. Well, I'm not a horror writer. I'm very glad to be one. But the thing is, a lot of the stuff I write, if it were horror, the publishers wouldn't have such a hard time trying to decide how to market it. I mean, they market them as westerns, as science fiction. They don't know, and I don't either. I can understand their confusion because they're Lansdale books. And I think that's what all of us really want to do, is find what it is that we like. And apparently the reason horror is the thing that interests us is we have enough elements in our work that touch on horror, because I don't necessarily write for just the horrific payoff. I write for all sorts of little things throughout the story that I think are going to be interesting, and try to use the characters and the theme to develop something that has some echo beyond the reading, as Raymond Chandler used to say. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I think the horror, type of horror that I like the least is the one that just is written specifically as a horror novel and tries to gross people out. It doesn't really have anything to say about anything.
Boo Book of the Month.
Yeah, Boo Book of the Month.
Right. They fill their rack fillers,
Yeah.
And is that kind of like one word for the title, and it's some sort of...
Well, a lot of good books are disguised by their publishers as Boo Book
Oh, yeah.
of the Month. And it may well be that that's what people want to read more of. That's what the supermarkets are full of. And so it's not up to me to judge what other people want to read. But I just get tired of seeing the standard.
Yeah, I do. I get tired of seeing that just written specifically to grow somebody out, and very cheap thrills, and it has really nothing to say on there. I don't think that really helps anybody. I mean, it may make money for the short run for the publisher and the author. I'm sure not a whole lot of money. But I don't think that really does much for the field at all. But I was also going to say, I think some interesting things happen, and it kind of real life is caught up with the horror writer. And it's, what we're trying to invent horrors or invent situations that we consider to be terrifying, and it's around us every day in the world. And you just turn on CNN, and it's just almost too terrifying to watch.
Yeah, you got plane crash, you got the earthquake, you got disasters in the Virgin Islands, the hurricane.
And these things, things similar to this have always happened, but our information network now is so intense that it's just one after another after another. And so it's an overload of horrible.
John, any pet hates?
Outside of my own books? No. I think that there is a problem with this information overload. There's a certain dulling of sensation or expectations, and there's a real problem there, because then there are or not a problem, I should say, an opportunity for the writer then to invent something new, to come at it in a new way, and that's the real challenge for anybody who's writing fiction. How do you top the evening news? And that's hard. Now the other problem that Rick was talking about, which is this, and also Joe, is the fact that there's so many books out there. Now I feel that in publishing the horror, it goes in ebbs and tides. When I got into writing my first book, they said, well, good thing you got a contract now because the bottom is going to fall out of this and they won't be publishing it. This was 10 years, over 10 years ago. So, at certain points, there seems to be a flood of these books on, or a new publishing house will decide, well, we really got to get into this, we really got to market a horror line, and all of a sudden, all of the books that have been rejected, countless times are repackaged and brought back. And when you figure that the life expectancy of a book on a paperback shelf is anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, it's easy for a publisher to do this, and they just fill it up, and you can keep filling these things up, and impulse buying means that 1 out of 5 of these books will be purchased. Luckily, we're now in a drought season again in horror, and that's good. Because what will happen is it'll sort of cleanse out the marketplace, and certain books will begin to shine, and also some new people who are really seeing something new, who are writing something new, or doing it in a new way, will emerge. But you have to realize that the people who are editors in this field have read a lot of these books, a lot of books that were rejected, and so when something new comes along, it'll get published. And the problem of classification is a problem on the marketplace that we have to live with and suffer with, because it would be great if a book was put out there and allowed to be purchased because it's a book, but no, it has to be initially categorized by the author or categorized by what it is, and all of these are the marketplace putting a footprint on the material. But I'm so delighted that anybody gets published, especially myself. That, I don't mind someone writing a lot of bad books before he gets before he writes a good one. I really feel that most writers have to write the bad books out of them. And it's occasionally some of those bad books will get published, but that's all right. I mean, I'll wait for the good one.
Well, I've already told you what I don't like, so I'll tell you what I do like. I'm liking starting to see the horror and westerns. I think that's a really good trend, because I would have never thought of that. And I love something like that. Like, oh gosh, I wish I would have thought of something like that as well. So I like that idea, and I also like the funny. Ed Bryant has written some real funny horror that I like a lot. And then you can I can tolerate the blood every other sentence, or killing somebody every other sentence, as long as it's funny. Yeah, that's always.
I want to talk about one of Rick McCammon's books, because it represents something to me. The book is Swan Song. I don't know how many of you have read it. I'm thinking of it from the perspective of a theorist. I have too many theories about things. And one of the theories that I have is that the technical craft of writing what I would call fantasy or high fantasy has gone in one direction. Writers working in that field have learned a set of techniques and rules for constructing a story. And horror has gone typically in another direction. And what horror has done is the scary thing, the thing that inspires dread. If it's not a real world thing like a serial killer, it tends to be formless, it tends to be kind of shorthanded, it tends to be indistinct. This has been the general habit. If you're writing a supernatural horror novel, you either latch on to something like Roman Catholicism and its dialogue with Satanism, and you just sort of follow something that's right there in front of you because everybody knows it, or you create a sort of a nameless, faceless horror that sort of inspires dread. Now, at the same time that this has been going on over in Lester Del Rey territory, there has been the elaborate working out, almost along the science fiction model, of an entire created world. Tolkien, of course, is the best example, but where you work out a magical system as if it had a rigor and it had certain rules that it followed. And one of the interesting things is that in those novels, the dark force and the light force seem to be relatively equal in size. Sometimes the dark force is larger and overwhelming, and the light struggles against it and fails. Sometimes the light force is ultimately stronger. Typically in a lot of the schlock horror that's come out in the early to mid 80s, there's always a kind of, and then they all got run over by a truck ending. I think John Saul, who is a pretty good technician in certain ways, tends to take the cheap ending. I'm thinking of the God Project, where at the end of the book, little engineered little boys who've been smothering their sisters and so forth. We think we've solved the problem, that suddenly there is an army of them that's going to take over the world and everybody gets run over by a truck. What's interesting to me about Swan Song when I was reading it is that I recognized it as one of the epic horror novels. In other words, it had a devil, essentially. But it also had an angel. And it was really interesting to me to see some of the same world building and some of the same, working out a logical, magical system, moving its way into what was essentially presented and packaged as a horror novel. I don't know what you call one of those, an epic dark fantasy. Probably not, I hope not. But one of the things that's interesting to me is to see the technique of the working out of an elaborate magical system make its way into a supernatural horror novel. That intrigues me. Let's stop things dead. Let's talk just a little bit about the influence of visual media. I guess a couple of questions would be, is your work, does the movie or the comic book condition or affect how you write? Is the knowledge that there are a lot of people who get their horror on the screen or on the in pictures affect you at all? And also, do you see any trends in film or in graphic novel that you like? Start from the left again.
I always try to write cinematically. I think that the greatest movie anybody can ever see, the best movie certainly, is a mental movie. And I try to construct all my books so you can see the characters. I think a writer is in essence an actor and lives in the way through all his characters, his or her characters. And a writer, creates the sets, does the wardrobe, costumes, casts the movie, does the lighting, sometimes the music, sound effects. And it can be a fantastic movie that you see in your mind. And that's what I try to do. That's certainly the type of book that I enjoy reading. You can see it mentally. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. Trends in films.
Yeah, does that influence you?
It really doesn't. I think maybe some of the new visual things that are being done on MTV. I don't think they interest me. I mean, I don't think they influence me, but they interest me because I think there are a lot of the visual cuts and visual work you can use on a mental level. If that makes any sense.
And you see a parallel evolution in what's happening, what's being presented in films, what's being presented in print, or are they going in different directions?
No, I think they're going in different directions. I fear that the film versions of movies are cheap. They go for the cheap schlock, and these. The thing about I think writing a book on a large scale is you have an unlimited budget. You can do exactly what you want to do and have a cast of hundreds of thousands, and movies can't do that. And it's interesting to me also that if you read a good book and you really, really like the book, this is a great book, super book, the movie is never going to be as good as the book. Never.
You always see the movie first. Do you have any thoughts about the connection?
Well, there's obviously a connection between films and my work. I'm more influenced by books, though, and always have been. I'm influenced by comics. I'm influenced by anything you see. I don't think you see how you cannot be. I mean, that's part of your culture. I think you ought to be ashamed of being influenced by movies. But I think you've got to understand that movies are generally a pretty stupid product. They're just something that you look at and it requires nothing of you. I've written two movie-related books. Well, actually three. Two in the sense of the two drive-in novels, both obviously the drive-in. But I tried to approach them where I used the drive-in and the old movies as something of a recognition factor. Because I love those old movies. But I also tried to write something else so that it itself had the feel of a B movie, but that had more going on than a B movie could put in. Like you said, you had an unlimited budget, but in many ways I wanted mine to read like I had a limited budget. I wanted it to feel like that the wheels were kind of showing and that you could see the zipper on the suit, and that sometimes the stuff was so outrageously stupid that you just... So I wanted it to have it did have a low budget. I wrote a low budget novel, you know. Followed it with another low budget novel. But I also did Dead in the West, which was a Western horror thing, which was very much influenced by Curse of the Undead, an old vampire Western, which I still like and have seen several times. And I never really tried to make that rise above that. I wanted to just capture that old B-movie feel and get it to roll. I really wanted to do a screenplay on that originally because I thought that in this case it would have made a better movie than it did a book. But since I couldn't get that done at the time, I said, well, what the hell? I'll take it took 15 days to write that book because it was just, that's one of the rare times that's happened. And I mean, hey, you know, it's not heavyweight, I guarantee you, but it's the right size and level of refrigerator when you get through reading it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and a lot of people have liked it and responded to it. And I think it's because it is about love of film. It doesn't really rise above that. It is what it is. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with having fun. You know, I can always be real pretentious, you know, great literary things. I'm just saying that I think that most books, if they're going to last or have anything to them, and I don't sit down and say, well, I hope this lasts for the eons. I sit down and I say, I hope this entertains me. Because I never can figure out what the hell you guys want anyway. And once I start trying to do it, then I figure I'm screwing up. You know, like television, I try to please everyone, end up pleasing no one. But still, those images of film and all that come in, and I try to put something of myself into it, or my perception of it. And so I think that, yeah, there's definitely influence there, for sure.
Do you have any comments on this topic?
When I was going to school, something reference and any sort of gathering was, well, what book had you read? Very rarely now do you have this reference. People immediately begin to talk at a cocktail party about what movies they've seen. So our point of reference in a society has shifted, fortunately or unfortunately, to the movie. And I think that as a writer, then you have to be aware that you have an audience that is raised visually. And what you have to do as a novelist is treat the reader as someone you've got to catch immediately and hold in your book. And you either grab it by the throat within the first couple of paragraphs, or you won't have the person. Now you can do this a number of ways. I was just thinking how Charlie Grant would do it in terms of sort of a lyrical seduction of a person, pulling them in through language, and other people that use violence like myself will try very quickly to kill someone off on the first page, so they'll stay there. Tom McCammon said in writing his books, he said you've got to have a blow up within the first two or three chapters, and I think this is true. One of the things that was interesting to me about this book, I mentioned earlier, David Myers, that he's completely blended this immediately from the first page on, where it is both a movie and a novel at the same time, and it's a very difficult trick to pull off. But I think as a reader, and as a writer, we really have to be aware that our audience is reading USA Today, and there are so many demands on their attention that they don't have time to invest in a book. And the idea of going back and picking up a Dickens or a Thackeray now and sitting down and having the leisure for 500 or 600 hours just to read is impossible. That's actually one of the reasons I like the idea of books being on tape. I think this is a great idea because it's getting our stories and our words spoken to people who are constantly on the run because of family and job and everything else. And any way you can reach an audience with your creative material is wonderful.
Well, one time we know that, the thing about the books on tape, I like the idea too, but it does get in the way of reading the story. I don't want to hear another person's voice. I want to hear my voice in my head. Well, it may not be my voice, my speaking voice, but the voice. And when I read the book, it gives me a certain voice.
Yeah,
I
not just right.
Yeah, I heard a Jim Thompson thing, and I thought, especially with him doing this terrible Texas accent, and I've got the terrible Texas accent, and I've got it legitimately. And here's this guy doing it, and it's just not right. That gets in the way for me. I just want to make that.
Well, as well as being a horror writer, I'm also a librarian, which is a great combination. and they're moving forward almost more than anything. So I've watched movies, forever, and I am very visual, like you are. I know what books people have on their shelf, and in fact, that's why sometimes horror is really uncomfortable for me to write, because I am so visual and I am really into what I'm writing, and I'm very influenced by films. Not so much films now, but I think films that I saw when I was a kid. I love old B movies, and the scariest movie, and if I could write a book like this, the scariest movie I ever saw was The Haunting of Hill House.
Shirley Jackson wrote a book like that.
Well, she wrote, I don't think her book is scary.
Oh, it's much scarier.
Anyway, recently the movies are The Night of the Comet. Have any of you seen that?
Yep.
So funny. It's just so stupid. I love it.
Have you seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space?
No.
It's too.
The Night of the Comet is the end of the world, and only Valley Girls survive. And then another movie is, I think it's called The King of Hearts. Is that the call? You all saw that when you were in college. And those two movies really influenced me to do a novel I finished about 6 months ago. I said, if I could be that funny, because I think it's really hard to be funny when you write. Connie Willis does a great job. And if I could be as heartwarming as King of Hearts, I would have written a great novel. Unfortunately, I don't have a real big sense of humor when I write, so it got really serious. But I think I'm really influenced by the visual.
I would go to something that Kim said and kind of challenge the panel a little bit. I was looking at the collections Primeval and Silver Screen, both of which I enjoyed. Very few, no women. Not only no women, but particularly in Primeval, a kind of ongoing subtext of anger against women. Now, I had pretty psychopathic parents. They were brilliant, charming. They kind of like cross between the Waltons and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I have anger at my mother and I have anger at my father. And it's very interesting to me to see how many men write stories where the ultimate message is their frustration and their impatience with women. And the fact that the slasher movie is kind of a statement, I think both for the boys and girls sitting in the audience watching this powerful male figure victimizing women and getting a very interesting message from it. I wonder, you guys are very subtle in your work. You're dealing with these tensions and these feelings. I think all children have a certain sense of their parents as dictators. If the parents are good, they mitigate those feelings and project them outward. If their parents are bad, they stay angry. Do we have a responsibility as horror writers not to endorse cruelty and to talk about cruelty and to, particularly towards the weak or the helpless? Since that's the matter of horror, which is helplessness, do we have to be responsible, or can we just do whatever the hell we want?
No, I think as writers we have to be responsible, and I don't think that's censorship. I think you have to do it from your own heart. And when I say I will never do a certain thing, like I said, I will never, because I get really tired of the misogyny. And like I said, I don't want to read about psychopaths because they're often women. And I did have a girlfriend who was brutally murdered by a psychopath. I don't want to.
Yeah, but the only thing about it is a lot of times we're talking about psychopaths, when you're not talking about, gee, it sure is fun to kill women. That's not the point. I think sometimes it's saying, look, these characters exist out there. I think the thing about me is it scares me. I mean, I think it scares me is it makes me aware of it. And if the whole book is designed just to have a series of victims to get to the end so the cop can smash the killer, then I'm tired of that. But if you can use that as some offshoot.
Well, and again, I'm not telling you you should write it. I'm never tell anybody, but myself, I said, now you wait 20 years down the road, you can come back and tell me I was wrong. But I have sworn that I will never write a woman being raped, and I will never write a child being murdered. Now that's what I've said so far. As soon as I made that statement about a year ago, because I'm so sick of women being raped and reading about it and seeing it, people saying, well, this is a social message. Bullshit. These were just women being victimized for the hell of it. So I said I'd never do it. As soon as I said it, of course, I had an idea. To show how awful it really was. I didn't write the story. wasn't ready to, so.
I think you're right, though. I think that most of it, that's what angers me about it. I think it's the thing that we're talking about films, and I was going to say, and I got off on it, is that so much of it, that's exactly what I hate, is the whole idea where it sets up a series of victims because they're women and murders them. What I'm saying is that there's a backlash against people writing novels that have more to them than that are maybe about, you know, the psychopaths in society and everything else. I read a nonfiction book called Serial Killers. It's one of the most terrifying books I ever read, but it's through all kinds of sparks for me for fiction, not because I thought, gee, wouldn't it be neat to get out here and victimize and kill some women, you know? Because serial killers, their victims aren't always women, for one thing. But I think that I agree with you on that. I think we have a responsibility, but I think there's a difference in showing what's out there instead of saying, gee, this is what I think ought to happen. It's like if you write about a racist character in one of your books, oftentimes it's interpreted, oh, this guy's a racist. It doesn't matter whether you yourself are not endorsing racism, that you're writing about a character that's a racist.
Well, and I think just personally it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think it's sort of indicative of a misogyny that I find really personally uncomfortable. I would like to do something to change it and make it my regular thing to do that.
Rick or John, you want to jump in?
A couple of one, Fury, the new book. It's the woman who is the main character of my book, and she's the one that wreaks havoc. So it'll be interesting to see whether I pick up a female audience, because I have been attacked for having women victimized in my books. But horror writing, as we all know, is a very sort of conservative form. And there's justice, there's a good and the evil, and good triumphs at the end in the majority of the book. So it's conservative, and it has a morals standard inherent in the material. This is certainly been true in the books that I've written. 3 or 4 of them have heavily dosed with Catholicism. Lately, maybe because I'm living in New York, I've noticed that I'm getting much more interested in my fiction. My fiction is getting much more interested in homeless and social issues like that. I don't go to a shrink because I think, I don't want to find out what's wrong. Let it work itself out on the page.
Yeah, it's broken out, fix it.
And I think it works itself out. And I do notice that the last couple of novels that I keep coming back to these social issues. And I think that I don't think I'm alone in this. I'm not that wide in the field, but I don't think I'm alone. I think other people are also concerned about this, and I know that the issues that keep coming up in terms of disaster now, these are moral issues that are being raised here about the condition of our society, and the horror writer is trying to explain it in an entertaining and an informative way, and you've got to be able to get the reader to read the material, and they're trying to say something. Cole's trying to say something about what happened in Vietnam and what happened to the people who came out of Vietnam. And I don't think that the writer really should, maybe the writer should be the last to understand and know what they're talking about. Other people come and say, this book is about this and that, but I'm just sort of getting a glimpse when I do my books about what they're really about.
Sure. Well, the first scene I ever wrote was a rape scene, and I'm not very proud of it now. That's a scene that opens up Bale's was a rape scene. I'm not proud of it, but I think it was the best I could do at the time now. But there was a lot of anger in me at that particular point, a lot of rage in me that I had to work out. And I think it's been worked out. But as it's been worked out, as I've purged whatever this anger is in me that has propelled me to do this, I find myself getting deeper and deeper into my own psychology and who I am and why I do the things I do. I've gotten rid of a lot of my anger, but I think I'm discovering deeper parts of myself. When I wrote the rape scene, I think it was, looking back on it, I think it was meant to convey some sense, certainly, of the situation out of control. I certainly wasn't advocating rape, of course.
Well, it's better to work it out on the page.
Well, I think it's exactly.
Well, you can talk about things that you're outraged about and show them, and not just say, this is what I want, this is what I'm outraged about, why does this happen, what can be done about it?
The horror that terrifies me is the horror that I might be the monster. And I think in the more subtle novels about serial killers, things like Coco and the Thomas Harris books, one of the things I think is going on, it might be perceived, if you think about it correctly, you might be able to think of it as men's fiction in a very scary sort of way. Because the condition of men is that underlying them all the time is this potential and this label that they are killers. This is something that's part of male culture, is that you get to kill people.
That's good. That's perception.
And if we can look at it in a subtle fashion, if we can elaborate a topic like that, rather than just sort of go with the cheap shot like you do in a slasher movie, then maybe we're doing some good work.
What's interesting to me is when we start to talk about books, we always venture into the realm of films. Usually every hard panel I've ever been on, we start talking about books and we stop talking about books at some point and start talking about films. I presume it's because films are certainly so pervasive in our influence, but it seems to me that we can do so much more in books and in our voices, the voice of a single person, that a film can do, which is the voice of a committee, and usually not very well done.
Not very smart.
No, but it seems to me that books are, if we may begin with the rape scene, but we work through the different levels, and the horror films have stayed with the rape scenes, and they haven't worked at different levels. So I think horror novels, by and large, really outshine anything that's being done on film, on the screen now.
Do you want to take a couple of questions? Does anyone have questions? You right there. Yes.
I got a comment, that's all right.
Okay.
It's the thought of what you're talking about, books and films triggered. And that is that, say when I was in college, about 37, there was a time when films were actually worthy of some kind of study and attention, and a whole group was built up about paying attention to some foreign movies at the time. I remember Robert Altman film was too many Americans had one. It seemed like this art has passed, where movies have gotten dumber and dumber and dumber, and have less interest under the surface. But the interest, so that graphic on this one, the interest in movies and the interest of regarding it as something worthy of deep study has grown and grown and grown, and people who want to pay more attention to them has increased, and they're looking more and more intently at nothing. But the lucky outgrowth of this collapse, I think, is that what we used to call genre movies, and most recently, let's say Near Dark, which was a B movie, as they used to call it, made for very little, but able to be infused with some kind of genuinely centric vision. You don't see those movies anymore. Easily you have 3 or 4 movies you could equate with Near Dark. In a year, let's say the year Covered in Bone came out, for instance, there were several movies on the part of Covered in Bone. Now it's not. There hasn't been a movie since Near Dark in any genre you would compare to Near Dark, just the horror. But what's so great, I think, is that writers have moved into the bridge. And now the book that you described, you wrote in 15 days, is the equivalent of the old B movie. Maybe not the greatest idea of all time, maybe not the deepest, but it's using the old B-movie convention of taking an ostensibly shallow idea and infusing it with deeper things, and using the shallow idea as a vehicle to carry the deep idea. And as the movies are too expensive and too accessible to do that anymore,
Right.
it's a great for us.
Like the cat people and I Walk with a Zombie. I mean, they were even those outrageous titles. The fact that there was supposed to be horror movies, those were really fun.
Or micro movies when we were like Wild Angels.
Yeah, my only comment about the B movies, I think the place that you can find them is like Laurel Entertainment. They're shorter than they used to be. There's like Monster.
There are a lot of the movies that aren't getting attention, though. A lot of them are really good or low budget movies that you don't see. Some of them are not always, good straight across the board, but they're at least interesting. Like things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space is not an intellectual movie here. But the thing is, it's an imaginative. Yes, it does. It does sound very. It's not like some cop could do it. But it's very imaginative, and I think imagination is as important as anything, because imagination is what starts you throwing those sparks anyway. And I mean, Killer Clowns is this outrageously stupid thing. For example, one scene that they do really grabs me, where they take the balloons and they make a little dog out of it. The little dog chases these people that they're trying to catch. And even though that's dumb, I mean, it's imaginative, and there are a lot of things in it like that. And I think it's even more interesting because it's so low budget that they had so little to work with. and that they did something that was imaginative and that was funny, and that really there's very little real horror in it. It's just bizarre, which, you know, I think gets back to what we talk about surreal being another part of horror fiction. But in that arena, there are a lot of interesting things going on. There are a lot of bad things going on, but like Near Dark that we talked about.
We have a comment in the back.
Yeah, speaking of surrealism and so forth, those who talk